Today for my final, we're going to be talking about the Hampton Court Palace. So Cardinal Wolsey, born in 1475, died in 1530. He dominated the court of Henry VIII in 1515 to 1529. Wolsey and Henry wanted to make England a main power in Europe. 1521 war broke out between France and England, leading to Wolsey to raise taxes. This made him very unpopular. His fall from power was caused from his failure to get the divorce approved from the Pope, and this was Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. The divorce, and on November 4th, he was charged and executed for treason. So these are some of the dates of the palace. I'm just going to mention a few. 1514, Cardinal Wolsey, Henry VIII's chief minister, leased the site and began construction. 1528, Wolsey gave the palace to Henry VIII. 1530, Henry took ownership of the palace after Wolsey fell from favor. 1689, Christopher Wren demolishes parts of the palace. This is due to complete destruction, and I'll talk about it later in a slide. 1760, George III abandons Hampton and leases it to wealthy residents. In 1968, a fire breaks out and damages the king's apartments. So how did the Tudor dynasty affect the architect style of England? So the Tudor period was spanned from 1485 to 1603, and this was a significant architectural development in England. This era saw a transition between medieval Gothic style and classic Renaissance style. This style is also characterized by half timbering, with wooden rafters and framework as seen, and the rest is filled with plaster and brick. One of the features also is this large chimney in the center of the building. Brick was also being developed during this time period. The oriel window is created during this time, and it's like a bay window, but it's a little higher off the ground, allowing more light to come through. The use of glass windows became a sign of the increasing wealth of the middle class. In the 19th century, this style was then reborn in England and other parts of Europe and even in the United States. The King's Apartments, the Great Hall, and the Chapel are some of the only survivors showing Henry's spectacular building designs as well as the interior decorations. During his reign, all 8 of his wives lived with him at the palace. He rebuilt his rooms a half a dozen times, and by his death, he had over 2,000 tapestries. These were woven with silk and gold thread that glittered in the candlelight. The Abrahamic tapestries along these walls are some of the oldest surviving and are still at Hampton Court. And to celebrate Henry and Anne's marriage, the carpenters added Anne's coat of arms to the roof and carved and intertwined H and A on the wooden screen at the end of the Great Hall. These are reminders of Anne's time as queen and can still be seen today. The coat of arms, as many historians say, is one of the few surviving belongings of Anne. And in 1603, Shakespeare performed many plays in the Great Hall for James I. So here is where we see that intertwining H and A. The Chapel Royal. In 1535, the construction started on the chapel, and the ceiling was the most important change or / addition done on the palace, and it still survives. The ceiling accessories were carved at Shoning, miles away, and had to be transported to the palace, where it was then put together. On the east side of the chapel, there was a stained glass window that depicted Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, but it was destroyed and then later was bricked up. So the great kitchens. In 1529 to 30, the capacity to serve the amount of guests took to feed had doubled. There was also an additional serving location that was added to the south. To the west, 3 smaller courtyards were built to hold offices for boiling, pastry making, fruits, and pies. Those worked upstairs above the kitchens made delicate sweets. Tudor courtiers would enjoy a variety of fresh fruit, slaughtered, roasted meat. The menu of dishes contained about 5,000 calories a day. Meals were not just about eating, they were a display of the monarch's power. Henry's food was prepared in private kitchens under John Bricket, and only the king was given a fork, which he would use then for dessert. Forks weren't very popular until the 17th century. 2 courses would be served to the courtiers at 10 and at 4, and it would be considered rude to eat everything, so they gave the leftovers to the poor. So some of the history of the remodeling. So again, it was first constructed in 1514. King William III and Queen Mary II commissioned Sir Christopher Wren to design a Baroque palace, which was built between 1689 and 1700. And a fire broke out in the south range of the Fountain Court, and the apartments were refurbished, and that was in the 1990s. And then 2015, the roof was redone. So King William III and Mary's II changes. When William III and Mary II remodeled the palace in 1700, a lot of royal interiors were swept away. However, some of the apartments in the palace still hold true to the Tudor style. Christopher Wren wanted to demolish the palace and start again, but he left it intact, obviously, and built the Fountain Court. Hampton Court's gardens are contributed to William and Mary, as well as the Privy Garden. So in this image, this is the king's private dining room. This would have been used by King William III for his private dinner parties for his male friends. So Christopher Wren came to help remodeling the palace. It barely had survived during the English Civil War. King William and Mary loved the location because it was out of the city proper and close to the river, and Henry collected tons of land for hunting. Because of the damage, they had Christopher style it to the Baroque period. Only the Great Hall and the chapel was saved after demolition. Some of the problems he faced with the front door was he had to figure out where the front door was going to be. And then the second problem was keeping the floors level because of the architect. He had to have a creative way of to keep the old style while also fitting the new style. And third, he also had to find ways of hiding the old palace, and he was worried that the older building would make his new buildings look pretty shabby. So in this image, we can see all of this white is the original, and he had these wooden panels blocking the old to make it look pretty. And then here we could see the difference between the two levels. So some of the Queen Anne's changes. 1710, Queen Anne had Christopher Wren remodel the chapel. Wren added boxed-in pews, organ, and a staircase leading down from the royal pew. So the Georgian dynasty also saw some changes. George I built added rooms for his son and his wife, for King George II and his wife Charlotte. They added a new kitchen. They had King George II had tons of different parties that were just fantastic. 1710, to make the court more dazzling, George I refurbished the tennis courts into an assembly room and the Great Hall into a theater. 1727, George II entered the palace as the final royal resident. 1734, Charlotte had William Kent decorate the walls of the Queen's staircase. So this is all of the Queen's staircase. You can just see how gorgeous and beautiful this area is. Kent used the royal style to design to contribute to Queen Caroline. In 1737, George didn't want to live in the palace anymore, so he leased it out to rich aristocratic widows and other tenants. And as the apartments were very glam and glamorous, they, however, were very uncomfortable, cold, and damp, and with no access to hot water. So to this day, the palace is still open. Queen Victoria opened it for the public for free, and so it's still open. And on the weekends, a favorite destination to visit is the royal kitchens, where the cooks would dress up in the Tudor clothing and prepare a meal in front of people to display what it was like to cook in the palace. And that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed.